Music has always been an integral part of storytelling, evoking emotions, enhancing narratives, and shaping audience experiences. In film and television, music's role has evolved dramatically over the decades, reflecting technological advances, cultural shifts, and artistic innovations. From the silent era to today's immersive soundtracks, the journey of music in visual media tells a story as rich and dynamic as the films and shows themselves. In the early 20th century, films were silent, and music served a crucial practical function. Without dialogue or sound effects, live musicians, often pianists, organists, or even full orchestras, accompanied screenings to provide emotional context and maintain audience engagement. These performances were sometimes improvised, but by the 1910s, cue sheets provided suggested musical pieces for specific scenes. Larger theaters employed composers to create original scores for major films. Music helped convey mood, character emotion, and dramatic tension, essentially becoming the film's voice. Notably, even though films were silent, music made them come alive. Early composers like Joseph Carl Braille, who wrote For the Birth of a Nation, 1915, showed how original scores could deeply influence a film's reception. The late 1920s ushered in a seismic shift with the introduction of synchronized sound, starting with The Jazz Singer, 1927. Now films could feature spoken dialogue and recorded music, fundamentally transforming cinema. This talkie revolution not only changed how stories were told but elevated music's role. Instead of just being a background element, music became an active part of the narrative structure. Studios quickly developed music departments, hiring composers, arrangers, and orchestras. Early sound films often featured extensive musical interludes, sometimes resembling musical theater. Composers like Max Steiner, King Kong, 1933, pioneered the idea of a fully integrated film score using recurring musical themes, or leitmotifs, to represent characters, ideas, and emotions. The 1930s to 1950s are often considered the golden age of Hollywood film scoring. Studios like Warner Brothers, MGM, and Universal employed full-time composers who crafted sweeping, orchestral scores that became essential to the film's identities. Legends like Erich Wolfgang Korngold, The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, Bernard Herrmann, Citizen Kane, 1941, and Miklos Rasha, Ben-Hur, 1959, crafted music that elevated cinema to new artistic heights. Herrmann's collaboration with Alfred Hitchcock, particularly in Psycho, 1960, demonstrated how music could manipulate tension and terror, forever changing the use of sound in thrillers and horror. During this period, television was emerging as a new storytelling medium. Early TV shows often used stock music or simple themes due to budget constraints, but the importance of catchy, memorable tunes, like the themes for I Love Lucy and The Twilight Zone, soon became apparent. The cultural upheavals of the 1960s and 70s were reflected in film and television music. Traditional orchestral scores gave way to more diverse sounds. Rock, jazz, funk, and experimental electronic music started to appear, matching the new wave of more personal, rebellious filmmaking. Movies like The Graduate, 1967, used pop songs by Simon and Garfunkel to underscore emotional beats, a major shift from traditional scoring. Directors like Stanley Kubrick opted for classical compositions instead of original scores, as seen in 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968, while others collaborated with contemporary musicians. Television music also evolved. Theme songs like Mission, Impossible's intense, rhythmic motif by Lalo Schifrin and the upbeat folk sounds of The Mary Tyler Moore Show reflected broader cultural shifts and increased sophistication in TV production. The late 1970s and 1980s saw a resurgence of the grand, orchestral score, largely thanks to John Williams. His work on Star Wars, 1977, Jaws, 1975, E.T., 1982, and Indiana Jones reintroduced the power of thematic, orchestral music to mainstream audiences. Williams' ability to create memorable, emotive themes rekindled the public's love for the big, sweeping movie score. Meanwhile, other composers like Jerry Goldsmith, Alien, Star Trek, the motion picture, and Vangelis, Blade Runner, Chariots of Fire, experimented with blending traditional orchestration and synthesizers, paving the way for the rise of electronic and hybrid film music. Television began mirroring film's grandeur. Epic miniseries like Roots, 1977, featured rich, cinematic scores. Iconic TV themes from the 1980s, such as those for Cheers, Miami Vice, and The X-Files, became cultural touchstones. By the 1990s and 2000s, technology had revolutionized music production. Digital synthesizers, sampling, and computer-based composing allowed for more complex and varied soundtracks. Hans Zimmer emerged as a dominant force, blending electronic elements with traditional orchestras in scores for The Lion King, 1994, Gladiator, 2000, and Inception, 2010. Television, too, entered a golden age. Shows like The Sopranos, Lost, and Game of Thrones featured rich, memorable scores. Composers such as Ramin Djawadi, Game of Thrones, Westworld, created music that rivaled big-budget films in complexity and emotional power. Contemporary film composers like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, The Social Network, Gone Girl, introduced darker, more ambient soundscapes, reflecting a broader range of emotional tones and storytelling styles. Music supervisors became crucial figures, curating licensed soundtracks that could define a film's or show's identity. Think Guardians of the Galaxy's retro mixtape soundtrack or Stranger Things' 80s synth-driven nostalgia. Streaming platforms have further transformed the relationship between music, film, and television. With international access to shows and movies, diverse musical styles are now reaching wider audiences. Korean dramas, Bollywood films, and anime have introduced global musical influences into the mainstream. Today, composers are blending genres more than ever. Hybrid scores incorporating traditional instruments, digital textures, and world music styles are common. Experimental sound design blurs the lines between music and noise, challenging conventional notions of a film score. Shows like Euphoria, with Labyrinth's genre-defying soundtrack, and films like Everything Everywhere All at Once, with its playful, eclectic score, push boundaries, showing how music can be as innovative as the stories being told. At the same time, nostalgia remains a powerful tool. Many modern soundtracks, from Stranger Things to The Mandalorian, revisit older styles, reminding audiences of the emotional power of musical memory. The evolution of music in film and television mirrors the evolution of the media themselves, a dynamic interplay of art, technology, and culture. From live accompaniment in silent theaters to today's sprawling digital symphonies, music has remained a vital force in storytelling. As new technologies and cultural movements continue to emerge, the soundtrack of film and television will no doubt keep evolving, resonating with audiences in ways both familiar and entirely new.